In the paper that I'm presenting today, we try to understand the importance of narratives or storytelling in increasing or enhancing the likelihood that a novel idea, controlling for its level of or degree of novelty, gets accepted, or at least in this case supported by the focal audience. So more specifically, we are looking at entrepreneurial pitches, and we distinguish between more or less innovative ideas that these entrepreneurial pitches are trying to bring to the attention of the receiving end, in this case venture capitalists. We try to understand how the way you frame the idea that you are pitching might affect the response on the part of the venture capitalist, meaning whether the venture capitalist is interested in investing in that idea or not. So in a broader sense, what we are trying to understand in the paper is whether the use of language, all else being equal, the way you frame things might increase the odds of receiving recognition for your idea. And that is something that goes back to some of my previous work, but we couldn't really directly examine because the best approach to really study the importance of the language is either systematic text analysis or running experiments. And so in this paper we run experiments, and we can really unpack, all else being equal, of course, the importance of language, storytelling, narratives, if you wish. It's a very basic, I would say almost minimalist approach to studying the structure of language, but the fact that we find interesting results, even using very simple stories, that suggest that language is really important, not to understand this problem. Yeah. So I believe that more generally, I mean, the producer can shape audience perceptions, audience reaction to whatever he or she submit to the audience attention, but there are conditions sometimes that you can't control, you cannot shape. So, and I'm not simply referring to exogenous shocks, okay, like major upheavals or major events that create conditions that might help the producer or the entrepreneur, or more broadly the innovator. I'm talking about even the way eventually audiences act or react, partly because the composition of audiences might change over time, and this is something that the producer, the innovator cannot control, but that can still have important effects on the likelihood of an idea to be recognized. Okay, so again, going back to the John Harrison's story, at some point the members of the Board of Longitude change, and in some cases these changes were in favor of John Harrison, so the Board of Longitude was for some time more receptive of the idea that John Harrison was proposing. Is solution to the longitude problem, but sometimes the audience turn out to be less receptive, less supportive. So these obviously were changes that John Harrison, in this particular case, couldn't control. Okay, so there are clearly situations where the producer, whatever he or she does, cannot completely control the situation at hand. Yeah. It's true, I mean, we like to think that the agent has a lot of control over the conditions that might or may or may not favor him or her, but definitely we're trying to overemphasize, if we embrace that perspective, the role of the agency. Okay, so there are a lot of other conditions that are completely outside the control of the agent or the producer. But they're equally important to explain his success, her success or failure. Yeah. I think that chance events are always important. It's important to characterize them and to be a little bit precise about what we mean, because otherwise it's like a residual category, the unexplained variance of any phenomenon, and then it's not clear what you're referring to. I think, just to give another example, in my earlier work on Corning, Corning was a pioneer in fiber optics for long-distance telecommunication applications, but although Corning is the recognized pioneer in its ability to eventually benefit from its work in this space was largely independent of its intentions early on, in the sense that the British Post Office in UK was interested in replacing copper fibers with a new type of fiber that could handle the larger amount of data of information that was exchanged through the existing, at that time, telecommunication infrastructure. And Corning, there was at that time a paper written by Cow and Occam that was envisioning the use of glass as opposed to copper for different reasons. Okay, and Corning was contacted by the British Post Office, invited to attend a meeting in London, and Corning sent one of its senior scientists to explore this opportunity, and eventually after that visit Corning realized that there was an emerging opportunity out there, and they decided to explore more deeply this opportunity and eventually to invest in the development of these new type of fibers. Okay. So again, that was mostly an external event that Corning did not prompt or start. So that Corning, in a way, was ready to take advantage of that opportunity for other things that had done until that point in time. Okay, so that is not like a major exogenous shock, or it's not an but it's clearly something that happened in parallel that Corning was not fully aware of, or at least did not trigger, and that eventually took advantage of. So in that case, you try to be very specific about what you mean by chance event. But clearly, these events are crucial to understand innovation in general, I would say. As it was for John Harrison, okay, that because the shipwreck that is a part of the story, I mean, was an important exogenous shock in the sense that the British Parliament created this huge prize for anybody who could solve the longitude problem, and the other important thing was that anybody was allowed to come up with a solution. So that obviously created a unique, if you wish, entry point for anybody, not just for astronomers or mathematicians. Okay, so anybody, even a layman, an outsider like John Harrison, could contribute his or her solution to the longitude problem. So that created very unique conditions that help John Harrison. Without that shock, probably nobody would have paid attention to like a self-taught man, an outsider, now coming up with a very odd idea about how to solve the longitude problem. Yeah. Yeah. I think that integrating different theoretical perspectives, although they may sometimes rest on different assumptions and also be more frequently associated with specific methods, has some advantages, obvious challenges, but also some advantages, because you can see the problem from different angles, and which in itself is important because it helps you understand the complexity of the problem and not be thinking about that particular problem in a silos way. And the category, going back to the first part of the question, the category problem is really a very complex problem that by its very nature lends itself to be studied from different theoretical perspectives. Especially if you look at the category, as we try to do in that paper, in terms of how you classify things, how you define the boundaries, not simply of an object, but also of competition. Okay, because in that paper in particular, we are interested in understanding how you define competition, and obviously, if you embrace the sociological perspective, competition is among actors, producers offering similar products. But that is also true in the economics literature, because if two products are a substitute one for the other, if they are basically similar, and therefore the buyer is indifferent to both of them. Okay, and then you can buy one as opposed to the other, depending on the relative price. Okay, and that is also true in management, because the similarity in products has been used to define strategic groups, so which companies is competing with which other company. So there are, although the different streams might use different languages, and the ultimate goal is to explain different things, but the underlying theme is how you establish comparability among different objects, including firms. And therefore you see the potential contact points, synergies among different literatures, and none of them resolves the problem completely. So looking at how the different literatures essentially address the same fundamental issue of comparability, how you establish similarity or dissimilarities, I think you probably get a better sense of how you can make substantive progress on the topic here. But obviously that poses challenges, because you need to be very clear about the assumptions behind the different perspectives, whether they are really talking about the same phenomenon, whether the level of analysis is the same or not. So, but when you clarify that, I mean, you are aware at least of these challenges, then integrating different theoretical perspectives, I think, is very important and fruitful for any kind of research. I think I'm not obviously proficient in any of them, in all of them. I think I know quite well some. I would say my strength probably lies more with the historical case approach, plus the econometric, some of the econometric techniques that I'm pretty familiar with, and with respect to the simulation, I don't write the program, so I don't essentially write the basic model, but I understand the model, or at least I contribute ideas to the development of the model. But that is because of the understanding of the theory, or the understanding of the phenomenon, and obviously the model, however stylized, has to embrace some of the theory that you are building upon, or even try to capture the key aspects of the phenomena that you want to model. Okay, so but although I may not, as I said, I don't know how to code, how to write the program that makes the simulation run. So clearly, it's important in that case to develop collaborations with people that are proficient in those methods, and then of course by interacting with them, you get to know better some of the technicalities of the particular methodology that you are applying. So even if you, as I said, if you don't master or the method, at least you work with someone that have a deep understanding of the methods, and they obviously you contribute to whatever projects you are working on, what you do best. Maybe the theory, or maybe you might be providing the data sometimes, or you contribute both in terms of data collection and theory development, and although the other person contributes the methodology, the technical skills for that particular methodology. So that is how things work out for me, and I think the choice of the method is not typically it's not by accident. I mean, I think this different methodologies have been used at different points in time because myself and my co-authors, of course, realized that in order to maybe address some of the questions that were emerging in understanding a particular phenomenon, we needed different methodologies. So, for instance, today, the paper that I'm presenting today uses experiments, but because after working on different papers and realized it's time now to unpack some of the mechanisms that we kind of allude to in our previous papers, but we couldn't really unpack using those other methodologies. So the only way we could really understand the importance of narratives, stories, also the language more broadly speaking, was to run by running experiments. It's not the only way, but that for us was the most obvious way to go, and that's why Simone Feriani, my main co-author, actually had a student who wanted to work with him on some of our ideas, but also interested in learning how to run experiments. So that for us was an opportunity to really explore this methodology for the first time. Okay. The other thing that I would encourage to do, especially when you become assistant professor or even professor later in your career, is to, if you have that kind of interest, is to not only keep yourself abreast with some of the recent, the latest developments, but also explore new methodologies. And nowadays there are many more opportunities to do that in a short time period than ever in the past. And what I have in mind are these short classes, like 5-day or 2-day long classes, where basically you can refresh your memory about some of these techniques, or even learn new techniques. I mean, so I do that regularly. I mean, I think Professor Paul Allison has started this interesting initiative, Statistical Horizons. It's not the only one, but in more recent times, I would say it's one of the most active, and they really cover a broad range of topics in statistics, and also more recently in qualitative research. So you go there, for let's say 2 days. It's like a full immersion, and it's both. In these classes typically combine some obviously mathematics or technical stuff, and then application. So it's an opportunity for you to learn about new techniques. So that obviously helps you in your research. So I think that even if you don't necessarily apply them right away, but it's good to know that there are these alternatives, so you are more aware of the alternative methodologies that you can use. And then when your research evolves in a particular way, you know, oh, maybe I should use this technique, or at least think about it and see whether that helps. I think many PhD students are in a rush. They want to finish the program early, if possible. And I understand that in some cases you have to, because you don't get financial support from the school. But although there might be other channels through which you can get some funding, and I would say if you invest in maybe an extra year to further polish and deepen your research questions and your analysis, and trying to make sense of the results of your research, I think that is very important. The other thing that is very important is to obviously be very focused on your dissertation, okay, because that is essentially your own identity for some time, probably for the rest of your career. But I think it's good to start thinking about related projects towards when you have your dissertation under control. I think it's good to start exploring alternatives that hopefully complement your research. I mean your dissertation, but also open up new possibilities. Doesn't have to be an entirely new research trajectory, but at least explore, could be maybe another methods or related questions for sure, I think. And if you start doing it when you are already an assistant professor, for instance, that might, might be a little bit more difficult because you have less time. And so towards the end of your PhD program, it might be a good idea to look at these other possibilities. And the other thing, I think, to many students and even assistant professors, especially at the very early stage of their career, they're too obsessed about producing papers. And so the idea is, I understand the pressure, I myself face that pressure, but the problem is that if you start thinking more in terms of numbers, or I need to have a paper as soon as possible, I think that is potentially dangerous because you don't optimize. In other words, you tend to send papers out when they are not ready, and then you don't enjoy the process, okay? Which I think has to be always there, because whether you work by yourself or you collaborate with others, I think if you don't enjoy the process, you only care about the outcome. Although obviously everybody cares about the outcome, but you don't enjoy the process, I think life becomes pretty tough, horrible sometimes, because you might be facing rejections, and that is part of any academic, any scholar's life. But you need to enjoy the process of writing the paper or working with someone, and if that's the case, I think that not only the quality of your work would be much, on average, higher, but then you are not feeling under pressure, and therefore you will really have the clarity of mind of addressing questions that the reviewers will raise anyway, but you address them before submitting the paper. So I don't think that there is any, let's say, any advice that can solve any problem, but I think the idea that you have to really enjoy what you're doing, the process, I think for me is crucial. I think.